to sustain yourselves, to hunt, fish, trap, and forage. Just as if treaty had never been signed. That was the agreement. And in return, we would share the land, because in our language, there literally is no word for ownership of land. We do not have that, because when you literally translate that ownership to own land, it really comes out, the literal English translation is you cannot own your mother. Our mother is the one who gives us life and nurtures us. So you cannot own her, but we can share what our Creator has given us. That's what the old people said. So that was the agreement, a peace and friendship agreement. Sovereign nations. So this is the traditional hunting territory of the Beaver Lake Cree, which is actually the traditional territory of Treaty Number 6. But we cannot speak for the other 49 First Nations, so that's why we say the Beaver Lake Cree Nation traditional territory. And you can see the black line there. That's the separation of the two provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's a very large area of land. And this is the land, when we signed treaty, that it was stated we could always move around in that piece of land freely. Within that piece of land falls 2 of the 3 tar sands deposits in Alberta. The southern portion of the Athabasca and the northern portion of the Cold Lake deposits, where the entirety, this is all in situ, there's no open pit mining that happens in our traditional territory. And you can see over there that the entirety of those 2 deposits has been illegally leased out to every major oil company in the world. The thing with treaty is that the federal government under the Commonwealth took on the responsibility of the First Nations people of this land under treaty. And the government has a fiduciary responsibility to the First Peoples of this land. They have due process that they have to follow. They have a duty to consult the First Nations people of this land. We are also protected under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and our right to free, prior, and informed consent. And I can tell you right now that we did not consent to that. We did not say that that could happen. So the traditional hunting territory spans 38,972 square kilometers. And 34,773 square kilometers of that has been leased out to oil and gas. 1 well site equals 1 hectare of habitat loss. And don't get it twisted, just because the white part looks untouched, we have natural gas extraction all over there. And my nation, our Indian reservation, is located kind of almost in the middle there between those 2 deposits. And here's some images of the in situ process. So these are seismic lines, and up over there is out on the Esso site in the Cold Lake deposit. So what you're seeing is a Google Earth image of the above ground piping. This is the images of the above ground piping. And the pipelines interweave over a vast majority of the extraction sites, and they are thousands and thousands of kilometers in length all over the place. And the thing with these pipes is that the animals, when they come to them, will not cross them because it's foreign to them. They will not cross the seismic lines because it's foreign to them. So what it's done is it's affected the migration patterns, and it's broken up the herds of animals, i.e. the woodland caribou, which is an animal that we used to subsist on. That's a direct violation of our treaty if those animals are affected. And the woodland caribou has been directly affected. And we actually have a report that came out that actually now has the woodland caribou listed under the Species at Risk Act. And so what the government did was they came back, and in their solution to bring back the caribou, because once they admit that industry is responsible for this, then it becomes a direct violation that they have to acknowledge. So what they came back and said was, well, we'll kill off the wolves. Really? For real. 5% of the wolves' diet is caribou, and you're going to kill off the wolves. Okay, well, we'll fence them in until they can repopulate. Oh, really? You're saying that to First Nations people? Let's lock them up. Yeah, we really like that. And then what happens when the herd, the same herd, is repopulating each other? Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Thank you. You're amazing. I didn't come here to sell you anything. I came here to share with you the one thing that the 99% and the First Nations people of this country, of this Turtle Island, the one thing that we have that industry and government will never have, and that's the truth. You know, and every once in a while, I try to take the time, you know, as a woman in our culture, we have that belief that women are the keepers of the water. When we talk about those life-giving abilities of the water, the milk of our mother, women who were gifted with that ability to give life, it's not by chance that women carry life in water. And so I try to acknowledge that and go to my nation's lake, the Beaver Lake, and I try to put tobacco down, you know, and I try to acknowledge the work that I do and the knowledge that our elders have passed on to me. And I was sitting there one day, and I looked down at my feet, and this really literally just kind of happened. This was taken with my iPhone. I was sitting there, and I looked down, and I thought, holy shit. I'm sorry I said that, but that's really what I said.
Say it again.
Holy shit, Crystal! This is where. When you were a child, you know, I'm only 31 years old. When you were a child, this is where the water line used to be. Where's all the water going? And then I started to think even further, now more about the medicines. You know, we have medicines. One specifically that pops in my mind is called rat root. In our language, we call it wikis. And that medicine, you know, in its purest form, it's told through our oral history that in its purest form, mixed with some other things that, you know, grow in the wetlands, in their purest form, they could cure cancer. That's what our old people talk about. But that wikis, that rat root, it needs clean water to grow. It grows right where the cattails are. And when the water is dirty, it will move away. It will move away from there. And so our people, you know, they know where to go on our land to pick things like that. The same stuff, you know, they'll pick maybe here this year and go somewhere else next year to give that time to regrow. And we were starting to notice that it wasn't there anymore, and it wasn't as strong as it used to be. And then I started to think about, you know, my uncle Al Lameman, who was chief in my community for 35 years. You know, he was sitting at an all chiefs gathering in the 80s, and this was a time when, you know, he said, you know, we still drank water from the tap, like it was safe, and, you know, and he had gone through a lot, you know, becoming the chief in our community in the 70s. You know, when he became chief, you know, there was these surrounding farms, these farmers in the surrounding areas whose, their parents or grandparents had leased the land. They had come and they'd settled there when treaty was signed. And they had running water in the 70s. Apparently that was real fancy back then, because what the federal government did to accommodate the First Nations people was they came onto the reserve and they dug holes in the ground, dugouts, those things that cows drink from today. Well, that's what they dug for us to drink. And when my Uncle Al became chief, he fought for our community to have fresh water, to have a water filtration system. He said, my children, I'm not going to leave, my children are not cattle. I will not lead my children down to the dugout to drink. And he fought for us to have clean drinking water. And I think about that today, when I look at our water, where is it going? Because here now we are today, it's not uncommon for us to get a knock on the door. The water truck driver who delivers our water. Because our water system treatment is different than the county. And it's not uncommon to get a knock on the door and he passes you a piece of paper, and it's an issue by Health Canada, a boil water advisory. Boil your water before you drink it, or you're going to get sick. So here we are today, airlifting our babies to the hospital for drinking contaminated water. This is in Alberta, the richest province in this country, this first world country, and that's a reality that we're living. Cancer rates are rising, not only for the folks up there in Fort Chip and Fort McKay, but everywhere. Respiratory illnesses are becoming common. We're taking moose from the land that have pus bubbles under the skin, beer with green meat. And I went up. Where am I at for time? How much? Oh. Okay. Continue on with the story. And that's another thing, actually, now that I just said that word. These aren't really stories. I mean, if you want a story, you can read a storybook. This isn't a tour. This isn't a show. This is our reality. So I went up. This was taken 2 years ago up at the healing walk that happens. We organize a healing walk that's going into its 5th year this year. It's going to happen either at the end of June or beginning of July. And it's not a rally, it's not a protest. It literally is the 14-kilometer walk around the open pit mining, and it's healing. We pray for our mother, and anybody can come to that. And I took my son up there, and my children. I'm a single mom to 2 kids. I've got a 5-year-old girl. Her name is Gina. I've got a little boy, he's 7. His name is Gray Sky. And he turned 4 on August 4th, his golden birthday. And I really kept them sheltered from this work. Because you're under direct attack all the time. And you speak out about this. And I thought, this is a safe place to bring him for his birthday, introduce him to this work that I do. Because all I know is, for him, he likes to hunt. And, for him, he says, Mama, fights to make sure that we have animals to hunt. And my little girl, she says, Mama fights for Mother Earth. And so I took them up there, and I had this thought that together, we would have some healing. Maybe I'd walk away with more strength to do what I do. And I tell you, I got healing all right. A little over halfway, just kind of where this picture was taken. My little boy got a bleeding nose, and I had to send him back. And then my niece, my 14-year-old niece, had an asthma attack. And I felt really bad, and that's still something that I carry today because I did that to them. So here we are, the Sahara Desert
in northern Alberta, which was once pristine boreal forest. And my Uncle Ron, you know, he tells me, if there's anything you could tell people, it's that, you know, this country we live in, this Canada, that boreal forest, every single thing a human being needs to survive is right there. We don't need anything else. And that's what those poor people of Fort McKay, that's what they have left of the boreal forest. The Sahara Desert, toxic sand. That's not a beach there. That's toxic sand. You know, when I question, you know, is this what our future looks like? You know, fish with tumors on them. Our old people, you know, our elders, they talk about the fish. You know, they say that, you know, the fish, they don't taste good anymore. That's what they talk about. They said it's like it's oily. They said, like it's mushy is the way they explain it. They talk about the ducks too tasting different. You know, they talk about that time where they could go, you know, to the slough, and they said that was the best water that they could drink. They could go to the muskeg, which we all know is a natural filtration system, and they would dig a hole. They would dig a hole in the muskeg. They would remove that piece of land. They put it off to the side, and they would go about their day, you know, picking muskeg tea. I think it's the English is Labrador tea. They would pick things like that, you know, cranberries, low bush cranberries, things like that, and then they would come back, and that little hole that they dug would be full of water, and they would just strain it with, you know, they always had handkerchiefs and whatever, and they would strain that water, and they said that was the best water that they could ever drink. They would go to the slough, and they would skim the top of the water, and they would take their dipper from their backpack, and they would drink that water. They said that was the best kind of water that they would that they would drink. And here we are today. You know, there's no way anybody would ever drink from there. Actually, I had this really awesome person made a comment. I made that statement somewhere. I don't know where I was talking, and so of course, you know, folks, social media, they like to post everything all over the place. So every once in a while, you know, I still get freaked out that I'm all over YouTube. So this video, this little clip went up of me saying almost exactly what I just said. And he comes along, you know, and he reminded me, you know, he said, well, how stupid is that? You idiots aren't supposed to drink still water anyways. And you know, oh no, because anybody would get mad. But I thought, well, you're smart. Because no, we wouldn't drink it. You're right, because we'll poison ourselves. Thank you for reminding us, and thank you for reminding everybody else who's going to read that comment, is what I told him. I went back the next day, you know, just because I wanted to see what other folks said, and he deleted his comment. You know, if anybody ever got schooled, I'd say that was one of those times. And so that's the thing with, you know, leading into now, you know, what can we do? What can we do about it? Do we just let it continue to happen? So that's the thing about treaty. And I'm just going to share this little piece with you that comes from Jack Woodward, who was initially the lawyer on our case. He said this, and he couldn't have put it in a better way, and I can't read it here, so I'm just going to turn this. Where there is a treaty or Aboriginal right, governments cannot destroy the meaningful opportunity to exercise the right. And for a right to hunt, fish, or gather plant or medicine resources to be meaningful, there must remain a harvestable surplus of the species being collected. And to have a harvestable surplus, there must be a healthy, productive wild population. To have a healthy wild population, there must be sufficient productive habitat to support that population.
In other words, there must be a healthy natural environment, and if the natural environment is degraded by industrial activity and the populations are stressed and put into crisis by industry, and if there is no longer a population of species healthy enough to support the right, then there has been an infringement of the right. And I don't know how much clearer it can get than that. And so within those rights, First Nations rights enshrined as Aboriginal rights in Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982 are arguably some of the most important emerging rights on the Canadian legal landscape, and certainly the most powerful environmental rights in the country. Thus, when these mega projects are destroying the First Nations rights to hunt, trap, and fish, which are in direct violation of our constitutional rights, the highest law in Canada, then there is grounds to challenge. And my Uncle Ron says this, you know, when we want what we want is the non-Indigenous people, the developers, to prove to us that there is such a thing as sustainable development. And the only way that is going to happen is if the Indigenous people are consulted and given all of the information before any development takes place, and I don't think that that's too much to ask for. And so, because of that, and because of that deliberate ignorance by folks like our Natural Resources Minister, Joe Oliver, who was quoted, and this isn't a direct quote, but it's pretty close, was quoted in CBC saying, tar sands land is uninhabitable by human beings. So you know, no community is being disrupted. Okay, well, that land you're talking about, actually, I live there. My children live there. And are you now publicly stating that you're acknowledging that, are you publicly acknowledging that there's deliberate ignorance that the First Nations people of Canada exist? Because I'm gonna tell you, Mr. Joe Oliver and Mr. Stephen Harper and, you know, Mr. everybody else with their brass hands, you know, in those fancy offices making decisions that are directly affecting us, we live there. We live there and we're not going anywhere. And so because of that, in May of 2008, the Beaver Lake Cree Nation filed a statement of claim in the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench, where we cited over 17,000 infringements on our constitutionally protected rights. So basically over 17,000 permits granted to big oil without the federal government following through due process and their duty to consult the Beaver Lake Cree. And to date, we are now at over 20,000 permits. And so the legal action is going for a declaration that the cumulative impacts of the tar sands infringes on the Beaver Lake Cree's inherent treaty rights. And so when we filed in 2008, of course, Canada came back, you know, and did what they could to stop this litigation. They've done everything that they can to actually stop this litigation. So the first thing that they actually did was they came back and they said, well, you know, you actually have to file all of those separately. So basically they wanted us to go to court 17,000 times. The judge said no. What part of cumulative don't you get? You know, wonderful things like that. And so they then, you know, there was Michael Mansfield who works for Tooks and Chambers, I believe. I don't know, he's a world-renowned, apparently, human rights lawyer who's based in London, England, I believe. He offered his services pro bono because, you know, folks started to recognize that, you know, litigations like this that are going to save, you know, potentially, you know, well, no, not potentially, they're going to affect, you know, and thus, you know, save all human beings, you know, taking on this fight that's going to ultimately protect us all. You know, and what this litigation said was, you know, we're not saying shut down the tar sands. You know, what we're saying is, you know, the bitumen is there, it's not going anywhere, let's slow down here. You know, let's take a step back and reassess what's going on here. And so they did that, and, you know, lawyers like Michael Mansfield stepped up and said, well, you know, they recognize that this is the nation's poorest people. You know, when we have, you know, things like our school, you know, being threatened, almost being shut down because we don't have any money. You know, so what the government did was they came back and they actually fought that right to have and practice law in Alberta. They've done a lot of other things, but still, nonetheless, early last year, the judge on the case set historical precedents, because this is the first time in Canadian history that a First Nation has been able to sue in the face of unmitigated tar sands expansion, so petroleum industry. This is the first time they've been allowed to be heard in the court. So early last year, the judge on the case granted the Beaver Lake Cree a trial. So we will be going to trial. We will be taking the Canadian government and the provincial government of Alberta to court for our treaty rights violations. And I think that, Susan Smitten, she couldn't have said it any better. She's the executive director of Raven Trust. What she says is, it's not fair to rely on the poorest people in our nation to stand alone and be the voice of reason in this effort. They have the power of their treaties to protect the planet, and we have the power of a nation to support them. And I just encourage people to get behind the line. They've figuratively and literally drawn in the tar sand, and we are looking for your support in this lawsuit, whether it's organizing a fundraiser in the community or going online and donating to our latest project efforts. So this is a critical case, because an animal, i.e. the caribou that we once subsisted on, there was thousands of caribou in our territory. This is only one example. As of 2011, we now only have between 175 and 275 caribou in our traditional hunting territory. The report also states that by 2025, there's going to be about an estimated 50 caribou in our territory. I don't think killing off the wolves or fencing them in is going to save them. 30% of the tar sands production, or 600,000 barrels per day, with plans to grow to 1.6 million barrels per day, and new permits are being granted daily. And this is a critical case because it would be the most powerful ecological precedent ever set in a Canadian court, because it protects the entire biological ecosystem with a view to preserving its sustainable productivity. That there again comes from Jeff Woodward. And the outcome is that this litigation will determine that crucial point when the system can't take it anymore. So the precedent that will be set by the Beaver Lake case is that it will be the first time a court is asked to draw the line, defining when there's too much industrial development in the face of constitutionally protected rights. And so with that, I want to say, I'm thankful and I'm grateful to each and every one of you that took the time to come here today. You could have been doing other things on a Sunday, like sleeping, and you decided to come here instead and hear a little bit about our litigation and hear a little bit about the rights that First Nations people have in this country, and what we mean when we say we do have the constitutional power to stop these developments. Because the matter of the fact is that we do, because the federal government has enshrined those treaty rights in the Canadian Constitution. So they have a law to follow and abide by. And with us as First Nations people, we abide by natural law, and there's nothing natural about people dying from cancer. And so with that, just you being here, you're helping to support our litigation. So Nanas, come on. Aye.
Because we always hear about the environmental impacts, and we don't often, or as often, hear about these really important First Nations struggles. So we're going to have some questions, but not right now. I think Crystal and Garth really spelled it out quite well, how interconnected we are with all of these issues. And so ici au Québec, on est vraiment connecté avec ce qui se passe en Alberta, même si ça passe très loin d'ici. Maintenant, vous savez probablement tous qu'il y a 2 pipelines, Enbridge ligne 9, qui est déjà présent. Ils vont juste faire l'inversion. On attend la décision très bientôt de l'ONE. Et on a aussi l'autre pipeline. Donc, juste avant que Audrey qui vient pour parler un peu plus des actions ici au Québec, on va passer un chapeau pour ceux qui veulent donner de la monnaie. Si vous voulez donner plus que 10 $, vous pouvez acheter un billet de raffle si vous ne l'avez pas fait déjà. Mais si vous avez juste quelques pièces de monnaie, on vous invite à le mettre dans le chapeau. So again, if you would like to buy a raffle ticket with $10 or more, any donation that you would like to support the Beaver Lake Tree litigation, which is some very important litigation, please do buy the raffle ticket. And again, we're also will be donating one of these beautiful prints that Garth has been able to donate. But again, if not, if you just have a couple coins, that would be excellent if you could throw in as much as possible into the hats. So, I would just like to thank you everyone once again for coming. Audrey will come up and speak for about 10 or 15 minutes. She's a student, also engaged citizen in some of these questions of extreme exploitation of oil and gas in Quebec. In 2011, she marched with La Moratoire d'une Génération, which was a month-long walk from Boston-Laurent to Montreal, which was there to emphasize the importance of being very vigilant about shale gas. And really, I think a lot of people feel like that march helped to contribute to building the anti-fracking movement here in Quebec and really led to the moratorium. Donc avec ça, j'ai dit en anglais, je dis en français, donc avec ça, je vais juste vous inviter à applaudir Audrey.
Bonjour à tous. I would like to start by saying that it's a great honor for me to be here and speaking after these great two speakers. C'est vraiment un honneur pour moi d'être ici et de parler après ces deux présentations assez touchantes. Et puis, pour commencer, je ne vis pas à côté des sables bitumineux. Je vis pas à côté des sables bitumineux, j'ai jamais vu les sables bitumineux, mais je pense que même si je suis citoyenne de l'île de Montréal, j'ai des bonnes raisons de m'inquiéter par rapport aux sables bitumineux. C'est un peu pour ça que je suis ici, pour que, en tant que citoyen du Québec, on puisse quand même avoir un lien, une conscience, puis faire un lien à pourquoi est-ce que même si on est au Québec puis c'est loin, on devrait s'inquiéter. So I just want to say that I'm going to mostly be speaking in French. I have some key points in English on the slides just for everybody to be able to follow. I'll be taking questions after in both languages. So, cette semaine, j'ai un ami qui me demande « Qu'est-ce que tu fais dimanche? » Genre, je m'en vais donner une présentation sur les sables bitumineux. Il me dit « Ah ouais, les sables bitumineux, mais pourquoi? C'est loin, c'est en Alberta. Pourquoi est-ce que tu t'inquiètes de ça? On est chanceux au Québec, on n'a pas les sables bitumineux. » Erreur. On vient juste de voir pourquoi, même si c'est loin, il y a vraiment énormément de raisons pourquoi on devrait s'inquiéter. Merci aux deux présentateurs avant moi. Puis dans le fond, oui, on respire le même air, on respire le même eau, mais ça s'en vient au Québec, les sables bitumineux, avec les projets de pipeline. Avec les projets de pipeline, c'est pour ça aussi qu'on a des bonnes raisons de s'inquiéter au Québec. Je vais mettre ça dans une perspective. un peu plus global, parce que oui, les sables bitumineux, c'est une exploitation non conventionnelle de pétrole, mais c'est pas la seule. Au Québec, il y en a d'autres aussi. On entend parler des gaz de schiste, du pétrole de schiste à Anticosti, en Gaspésie. Il y a la plateforme en haute mer aux îles de la Madeleine. Il y a plusieurs projets de pétrole non conventionnel. Puis l'arrivée des pipelines va juste amener une autre source de pétrole non conventionnel ici au Québec. Quand je dis non conventionnel, ça veut dire que c'est moins facile d'aller chercher ce pétrole-là, c'est plus dommageable à l'environnement, plus d'impact pour la santé, c'est plus coûteux. Alors, il faut être conscient des impacts de cette technologie-là, de ces ressources-là. Et puis, on veut avoir une transition vers les énergies renouvelables, on veut réduire notre consommation de pétrole, réduire notre dépendance au pétrole, mais c'est un processus graduel, et d'accepter l'arrivée de ce pétrole-là au Québec avec les pipelines, l'arrivée des sables bitumineux, ça va juste permettre d'ouvrir la porte grande ouverte pour tous ces autres projets-là de pétrole non conventionnel. Alors, il y a différentes raisons pourquoi on devrait dire non aux sables bitumineux. Oui, parce que ça retarde notre transition vers les énergies renouvelables. Oui, parce que ça a l'impact sur l'environnement et la santé. On a vu les deux présentations des impacts incroyables des sables bitumineux, mais aussi parce qu'on va être solidaire avec ces gens-là. On est tous dans la même lutte. On vit sur la même planète, on respire la même eau, la même air, alors c'est important d'être solidaire avec ceux qui sont directement touchés. Il y a différents projets de pipelines. C'est comme un scary monster, c'est comme une carte avec tous des chemins, puis c'est comme son sac, on se fait envahir. Mais il y a différents de ces projets-là qui s'en viennent au Québec, la ligne 9 de Enbridge, entre autres, l'énergie Est de TransCanada, et puis le pipeline Montréal-Portland qui part de Montréal pour aller aux États-Unis. Vous en avez sûrement entendu parler, vous avez sûrement vu des publicités, il y en a partout, des publicités d'Enbridge de TransCanada. On va regarder un petit peu plus en détail c'est quoi. So I'm going to switch to English for this part, just to make sure that some of the technical details on the pipeline are understand by everybody. So line 9 from Enbridge is an existing pipeline. It's already in the ground, and right now there's oil that goes from Montreal to Sarnia in Ontario. And the project is that they want to reverse this pipeline to bring oil from Sarnia to Montreal, so to bring tar sands to Montreal. We have a bit of a detailed map here where it goes through the Quebec. So it goes through the agricultural land in la Montérégie, but also through neighborhoods in Terrebonne, Laval, on the North Shore. And I like this picture because it just shows the ironic of what we're ready to do to have oil. Let's pass it underneath the children's playground. So the issue with Line 9, it's a really old pipeline, 40 years old. Yeah, 40. And then they say that pipelines will last forever. What lasts forever? Usually not much. So they like to make us think that there's no problem, but I would be concerned in my backyard. There was a 40 years old pipeline. They would want to reverse it, and from dilbit, so diluted bitumen, which is much more viscous, more heavy, more. I mean, if there's a spill, it's much heavier harder to clean. And Line 9 goes through crosses 3 major rivers in Quebec. La rivière des Outaouais, la rivière des Mille-Îles, et la rivière des Prairies, which all feed into the St. Lawrence River, which is the source of water for about 50% of the province of Quebec. So this is also good to have in mind. So the Enbridge company asked to be able to reverse the flow, increase the capacity. Yes, it's an old pipeline and they want to increase the capacity up to 300,000 barrels a day. And they want to have the permission to pass dilbit into it. So the situation now is that they've been heard by the National Energy Board. We're waiting for the report or the decision from the NEB soon. But whatever the decision will be, we're not going to stop the fight because this is going to bring dilbit to Montreal, so it's going to be refined in Montreal. And what does that mean? Well, increase in air pollutants for increase in respiratory health diseases. And already in the eastern part, that's some of the points in French, yeah. So the eastern part of Montreal is already most affected in terms of air quality. Montreal is one of the worst cities in Canada in terms of air quality already. And there's about 30% more death related to respiratory health diseases in Montreal, in the east part of Montreal compared to the rest of the island. And there's higher rates of consultation for children under 2 years old related to breathing problems. So that's what we can be expected to happen with line 9. And then we've probably all heard of Kalamazoo, so I don't want to go into the details, but we know what are the risks associated with spills and pipelines. The second one, that's another big one, another big monster coming to Montreal. The Energy East from TransCanada, you've probably heard of as well. This one wants to carry 1.1 million barrels per day. That's 175 million liters per day. That's scary. This is one of the biggest pipelines in the world in terms of capacity. There's not much pipelines which more than 1 million barrels a day. So they want to convert the partly red, an existing pipeline to that is carrying gas, natural gas. They want to convert it to pipeline, an oil pipeline. It's also about 40 years old pipeline as well. And then they want to build 1,400 kilometers of a new pipeline across Quebec all the way to New Brunswick and to St. John's to reach that big refinery where they want to export it. And that's the big difference with Enbridge, is TransCanada, they don't want to bring this to Quebec for the energy independency of Quebec. They just want to export because they can sell the barrels of oil at a higher price at the international market. And the big objective of these companies is just to make more profit. So they want to sell it where they can make more money. So they want to reach a port, the one in St. John, to be able to export. And maybe they're going to be exporting from Montreal, who knows. So it's not for our benefit. So it's just, they just want to cross the country, cross Quebec, and then we're going to bear the risk of a spill while they're going to make money exporting it. Yeah, and then pipeline always leaks. It's not a matter of where, it's a matter of when. We've seen it, I mean, TransCanada had a leak of a natural gas 2 days ago. You've probably seen a picture of that big gas explosion on the news. Who knows if it's going to happen in our backyard here. So the status is that they delayed their application for the National Energy Board. It should happen early sometime in 2014. So this is going to be a big issue to follow in the next months in Quebec. And then I'll be talking a bit more about some citizen movement to get involved in if you're interested. And then, oh, yeah, that was the points in French. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting to change the slides. And then the last one that we've heard a bit less, or we've heard maybe under another name, is the Pipeline Montreal Portland, which is the yellow section. And if you take the line 9 and this pipeline together, it looks really familiar with the Trailbreaker pipeline that some may have heard of in 2008, which was this idea of bringing oil all the way to Portland to be able to export it from there. But they decided that maybe if they break up the project, it's going to be easier for us to swallow the pill than if they try to sell the project in one big piece. So the Pipeline Montreal Portland is two pipelines, one 65 years old, the other one 50 years old. They're even older. And the combined capacity is 100,000 barrels per day. 600,000, what did I say? 600, the numbers, yeah, it's 100,000. 600,000 liters per day. Barrel. That's twice the line 9 capacity. And right now, one of them is bringing oil from Portland to Montreal. And the idea is to be able to reverse, eventually, to bring tar sands to Portland and have access to another port to be able to export. So that project, the Trailbreaker one, kind of stalled in 2009 because of the economic crisis. But now there's kind of a revival in interest because, well, they see that if tar sand is coming to Montreal, well, they could potentially have access to another port and export even more. So there are a lot of actions with the industry in the States to be able to have access to permits for expansion and all these things are which shows that they're kind of preparing for that. But there's been a lot of resistance, and it's a bit of the beginning of the resistance in Quebec with Denham, where they were able to stop the construction of a pumping station, and it was finally, the court finally approved that in 2012, February 2012. So these are all the pipeline projects. Let me switch to French. Je vais revenir en français maintenant. Alors, on voit tous ces pipelines-là. Qu'est-ce que ça signifie pour nous au Québec? Mais ça veut dire qu'il y a des gens au Québec aussi qui vont être directement touchés. Puis quand je dis ça, je ne veux pas du tout minimiser les impacts que subissent les Premières Nations d'Alberta, pas du tout. On reconnaît que leur lutte dure depuis plus longtemps puis qu'ils sont affectés d'une façon encore plus sérieuse que nous, on est ici. Sauf que maintenant, on fait face au même enjeu des Sables Bitumineux. Et puis, on est dans cette lutte-là ensemble. Et puis, on n'est pas seul, on ne veut pas se sentir isolé, on va être solidaires dans nos luttes. Même si les luttes sont un peu différentes, mais les objectifs sont différents. Les objectifs, sont les mêmes. On a une vision commune de vouloir faire en sorte d'arrêter de détruire notre monde, comme on le fait. Alors, je voudrais parler un petit peu de la marche citoyenne qu'on a faite sur les gaz de schiste au Québec, parce que c'est vraiment la solution. C'est nous, la solution, c'est les citoyens. En se rassemblant ensemble, c'est là qu'on peut faire une différence. Alors, on a marché de 700 km de Rimouski à Montréal contre l'industrie des gaz de schiste au Québec. Et puis, même si le gouvernement, au début, ne voulait pas écouter, ils disaient non, eux autres, ils avaient déjà vendu les claims pour l'exploitation du gaz de schiste. Bien, quand il y a des gens comme ça qui traversent la province, puis ça se termine avec une manifestation de 10 000 personnes à Montréal, bien, tout d'un coup, c'est moins intéressant pour l'industrie, puis les actions ont commencé à diminuer. Puis les gens avaient plus goût d'investir, puis c'est devenu moins intéressant pour l'industrie. Alors, on aime à croire qu'on a aidé à faire partie du jeu d'échecs, puis de faire jouer les choses, puis de changer le cours des choses. Alors, c'est un peu ce qu'on va essayer de faire avec les pipelines, de dire que on ne va pas les laisser faire, puis on va se rassembler, puis ensemble, on peut faire un changement collectif. Oui, ça prend des actions individuelles, on peut changer de mode de vie, on peut essayer d'utiliser un peu moins notre voiture, mais il faut aller plus loin que ça, il faut un changement radical, il faut se rassembler, il faut ensemble faire un changement, un shift collectif. Il faut ensemble demander à notre gouvernement de faire des changements, il faut ensemble essayer de faire modifier le cours de ce que les compagnies veulent aller chercher. Puis, ça semble un peu difficile quand on dit juste comme ça, comment est-ce qu'on peut, mais ça ne prend pas tout le monde, ça prend juste un nombre assez critique pour faire tomber le premier domino, si on peut dire. Le premier domino qui va faire que tous les autres dominos après vont suivre. C'est avoir un nombre critique pour essayer d'influencer les autres, puis les autres vont suivre. Il y a différentes façons de faire une différence. Puis, ça va être à chacun de vous de trouver c'est quoi ce quelque chose-là pour vous. Est-ce que ça va être d'écrire un article dans votre journal local, de parler à votre voisin, de faire une présentation. Il y a différentes façons, c'est tous ces petits gestes-là qui, ensemble, créent un mouvement collectif. J'ai écrit un blog sur TransCanada, puis j'étais surprise, j'ai reçu une réponse d'un des directeurs de communication de TransCanada. Je ne m'attendais pas à ce que mon blog ait autant de portée. Mais j'ai dit, bon, je suis contente, ça leur fait peur un peu. Ça veut dire que c'est tous ces petits gestes-là ensemble qui font une différence. Ça veut dire qu'eux voient la construction d'un mouvement, que ça leur fait peur, puis ils veulent réagir. C'est comme la sortie du manifeste pro-pétrole. Vous avez sûrement entendu dans les nouvelles. Bon, pourquoi ils sortent ça? C'est sûrement pas pour convaincre notre gouvernement, parce que notre gouvernement est déjà d'accord. C'est pour essayer d'influencer ceux dans la population qui sont un peu hésitants. De se dire qu'ils ont cru bon de sortir publiquement pour essayer d'influencer l'opinion citoyenne parce qu'ils sentent qu'il y a un mouvement de résistance qui est en train de se construire. Puis moi, je pense que c'est une bonne nouvelle. Puis ils nous ont juste sorti ce manifeste-là pour nous donner plus de bonnes raisons de résister et de continuer à construire ce mouvement-là. Il y a d'autres belles choses qui se font. Il y a des gens ici dans la salle qui font partie de la Divest McGill, Divest Concordia, qui constitue, ça veut dire de vouloir retirer les investissements, les placements des universités pour les retirer de l'industrie pétrolière. C'est une autre façon de faire sa part, de faire partie du mouvement. Ça peut être, par exemple, une prof qui m'a dit à un moment donné, « Ça, Audrey, moi je suis pas activiste, j'irai pas dans la rue avec une pancarte, j'irai pas avec vous manifester dans la rue, mais elle dit, j'ai le goût de faire partie du mouvement quand même. Elle dit, je pense que je vais monter un cours pour parler à mes étudiants, puis leur parler de c'est quoi les conséquences de l'extraction d'énergie, puis de nos modes de vie énergivores. Puis c'est excellent. Chacun, on peut trouver notre façon de faire partie de ce mouvement-là. C'est pas tous avec des pancartes, mais c'est chacun avec nos petites actions qu'on va faire une différence. Alors, j'ai laissé derrière, s'il y en a qui sont intéressés, il y a une marche qui est en train d'être organisée au printemps, une marche pour les pipelines. On est dans les premiers, pour manifester pour notre opposition aux pipelines. Je les parle, excusez-moi. Donc, une marche contre les pipelines, une marche citoyenne un peu inspirée de celle qu'on a faite sur les gaz de schiste. Et s'il y en a qui sont intéressés de s'impliquer à organiser ou juste d'être mis au courant pour marcher à un moment donné dans cette marche-là, je vous invite à laisser vos coordonnées à l'arrière, puis on vous tiendra au courant. Et puis, ce qui est fort aussi, il faut que je conclue parce que là, 2 minutes, c'est bon, j'ai quasiment fini. Dans le fond, ce qui est fort que les compagnies n'ont pas puis que nous, on a, c'est des liens dans les communautés. On se connaît entre nous, on connaît nos voisins, il y a des communautés le long de la ligne 9 qui sont vraiment, ça a été leur force, c'est la force dans la lutte contre la compagnie Lambridge, c'est qu'entre nous, on se connaît, puis il faut utiliser ces liens-là pour être capable d'être en collectivité, ensemble, contre l'industrie. Puis je vais prendre les 2 dernières minutes pour parler de la naissance de la coalition citoyenne de la COVO, la coalition Vigilance Soviétique. Il y a plusieurs des membres qui sont ici cet après-midi. Puis, on est passé à travers différentes choses. On est allé à la commission parlementaire sur la ligne 9 avant Noël. Il y en a peut-être qui en ont entendu parler. Elle n'est pas aussi populaire que celle sur la Charte des valeurs. Mais bon. C'était une commission qui entendait beaucoup des gens de l'industrie, des gens de certaines ONG, mais aucun groupe citoyen. Puis nous, on a voulu avoir notre mot à dire, puis se faire entendre à la commission. Donc, on a contacté le ministère pour leur dire qu'on aimerait ça être entendu. Puis ils nous ont dit non, c'est pas possible, c'est déjà fixé, la commission est déjà... les gens qui vont être à la commission sont déjà identifiés, on ne peut pas vous recevoir. OK, bon, c'est bon. On ne connaît pas trop... moi, je ne connaissais pas trop. Plusieurs des gens de la coalition qui ne savaient pas trop comment ça fonctionnait. Donc, on les a écoutés, puis on dit qu'on ne peut pas. On a fait une conférence de presse pour dénoncer le fait que les citoyens ne pouvaient pas être entendus. Le lendemain, on reçoit un appel, dire « Ah, ben finalement, ouais, on va vous entendre. » Donc, il ne faut pas avoir peur de parler, de sortir, parce que la voix des citoyens, c'est pas juste la voix des citoyens, c'est la voix des citoyens. Oui, on a notre mot à dire, nous aussi. Donc, finalement, on est allé à la commission parlementaire pour finalement avoir été vraiment déçus, puis de se dire que c'est pas à travers les institutions en place que le changement va se faire. Il ne faut pas avoir confiance en notre gouvernement, il ne faut pas avoir confiance en l'Office national de l'énergie ou ces instances-là pour nous protéger puis avoir le monde, la vision du monde qu'on a. Mais il faut le faire nous-mêmes, ce changement-là, puis se prendre en charge pour faire un changement. Alors, sur ce, j'aurais encore plein de choses à dire, mais je pense que quand terminé, on ira avec les questions, mais merci d'avoir été là, puis je vous laisse en disant qu'il ne faut pas perdre espoir. Il y a beaucoup de luttes citoyennes qui se sont gagnées, puis je pense qu'on en a une belle devant nous avec les pipelines qu'on peut gagner aussi. Puis je vous invite à penser à c'est quoi votre petite action à vous que vous pourrez faire pour faire une différence. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Audrey. Avec Sarah, la chance, on va juste vous annoncer un peu sur le raffle. Comme logistiquement, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire, la suite des choses pour le raffle. Finalement, on va piéger après la période des questions. On va tous aller dehors parce que sur chaque événement de cette tournée en Nouvelle-Angleterre et Québec, ils prennent une photo. On prend une photo avec tout le monde. Donc, tantôt, on va piéger là. So, do you want to come and say that in English?
I don't know what you said.
I was just to say what we're going to do.
Okay. So hopefully we're saying something similar. So I'm going to pass these raffles around for others. When the hat went around, take a raffle, okay? And I'm going to put your matching number in the bin to draw, okay? It's not a perfect system, but it'll work. And if you run out, and some more should have gotten this, raise your hand and I'll get some more. And then at the end, as you can imagine, creating this tour, we want to have a sense of unity. So we've created this banner where we're taking a photograph of everyone that came to each event, all 9 stops here in Montreal and throughout the States. So if you can go out into the lobby, we'll all get behind the banner and have a photograph. And I'm going to not draw for the photograph, for Garth's photograph until after I take your photo. So I'm going to hold you hostage here. So if that makes sense.
Okay, that's it. That's pretty much what I said, except the first part. Donc, maintenant, ce qu'elle va faire, si vous avez mis de l'argent dans le chapeau, prenez un billet, raffle, comment on dit ça?
Coupon.
Piégé. On va faire un tirage. Donc, le tirage, on va faire tout de suite après le photo. On va prendre une photo, comme j'avais dit, avec tout le monde ensemble. Ah, vous gagnez, Alain, je vous ai dit 2 ou 3 fois. Donc, c'est une photo que Garth a pris, pas des Sables Bitumineux, mais de la forêt boréale, Boreal Forest. Where is could you explain the photo, where it's from?
It is from the Athabasca.
C'est une photo du Athabasca Delta qui est en amont qui est en aval, excusez-moi, des Sables Bitumineux. Donc maintenant, je vais juste inviter, I'm going to invite Garth and Crystal and Audrey up to the table, and then we'll just proceed with about 15 or 20 minutes of questions. Donc, je vais circuler avec le microphone si vous avez des questions. Et si vous n'avez pas besoin de microphone, vous pouvez peut-être signaler aussi. Greg, do you need a microphone?
I don't think so.
OK, donc notre première question, c'est Greg Mickelson.
Thank you very much to all 3 speakers. Wonderful presentation. I was just wondering if the Beaver Lake case is going to be a jury trial or an unelected judge. Is it going to be like a jury trial? Do you know?
We haven't even been granted a trial yet, so I don't know. We really don't know much.
Do you good, lady?
We don't,
Doesn't seem.
not great. There is green. As far as we haven't even been granted a trial date yet, so we don't even really know what's going on quite yet. All we know is that we have to build the case, so we have to get the cumulative impact reports prepared, and that's kind of where we're at right now. We haven't had the first case management conference yet based on the trial dates. Sorry, can't answer that.
Are there any other questions? I have a question about litigation in Alberta and on the tar sands. I understand that Athabasca Nation also has a court case against Shell. Beaver Lake, you guys have against it's against the federal government or Canada. Are there any other? Are there any other court cases of the nature?
Fort McKay, which is right in the literally right within the open confinement, right includes that port. They just filed a litigation, and theirs has to do with, see with the Fort McKay people. They don't know if I'm overstepping any boundaries. But basically my understanding is that the Fort McKay folks, you know, they have engaged industry, so has the Beaver Lake Nation, so has Fortune. And I mean, it's just it's our reality. You know, it should never be okay that we have to choose our Indigenous ways of knowing and being over feeding our families. But that's a reality of ours. You know, and unfortunately today, our kids have to eat. So, you know, we do engage industry. So Fort McKay has engaged industry, and, you know, my understanding is, you know, they've had, you know, a lot of interaction with them. But when they entered into that interaction in those agreements, what they had said was, you know, there was one section of land, their traditional hunting territory, Moose Lake area, Moose Lake area, which was, that's where they drew their line in the tar sand. That is untouchable. you know, we'll open everything up, you know, for agreement. You know, we'll talk about it. We'll, you know, but that piece is on. You can't touch that. And now they want to expand into that. And so the Mackay people have filed in relation to the protection of that piece of land.